All right, welcome everybody. My name is Nico Chen. I am the program manager of literature and writing programs here at Mechanics Institute, and I'm just so happy to see all of your faces here today. I see some wonderful members who are our steadfast members, and I also see so many new faces, and it's just glorious to see all of you together in this space today. I do want to start us off with a land acknowledgement, and actually this one is from SFPL, and it's actually designed for children. So actually, I want everyone to stand up to do this land acknowledgement together. So the first one is, here is the ground, and touch the ground if you can. Here is the sky, and reach your hands up to the sky. Here are my friends, and reach your hands out to your friends. And here am I. Big hug. Wonderful. Sit back. We stand together, hand in hand, and thank the Ramatusha Lomi, the traditional caretakers of this land. This land on which we like to play, we promise to look after its carefully. And now I'm going to introduce the wonderful Christopher Marmolejo. Christopher Marmolejo is a recognized tarot and astrology expert and comfortably draws connections between the two. They regularly host tarot classes, workshops, and consultations. Having a background in traditional teaching as an English teacher, they're committed to making the archaic understandable and accessible. There's evidence in their book. Their Instagram is @theredread, and their Substack is theredread.substack.com. And let's welcome the wonderful Christopher Marmolejo. So Christopher, before we actually have a talk, I would like for you to begin with a reading.
Thank you. Yes, can you all hear me all right? Thank you for being here. I'll be reading from the introduction, kind of entering in the text a bit.
And in case they want to read along, which page will you be starting?
Thank you. Page 3. All right. You have it looking ready. By reframing and rereading the text out of tarot, it can be claimed is an alternative local epistemology of the people that can renew the divinatory animacy that permeates ancient ways of knowing in the present language body. Our sense perception is represented by the symbolic code that is language. Language is more than intellectual. It makes meaning of the body and spirit, the speaker, reader, writer. True language is never mechanically intellectual. It is sensuous, evocative, emotive. It is animate and animating. The sound of our speech expresses the living spirit. Despite extended laws, we can again root ourselves in the cosmic order through the image vehicles offered in the tarot. Each symbol is a library of concentrated stories, knowledges, names, parables, omens, and augurs. The practice of laying cards can bring forth the creative communion through the application of the divinatory mind that branches from the metamorphic mind, the collective mind by which we describe, create, and imagine an animate world with interrelated participation. These symbols express the processes of unseen forces materializing as spiritual matter. Though it takes conscious effort to call upon the metamorphic mind, by summoning it from the subconscious, we can again commence communion with nature every time we lay cards. Red Tarot images the reflexivity of a sovereign subjectivity. Its readers are part prophet, part poet, part political participant. Their self-reflexivity intersects social critique, navigating dangerous inner and outer terrain with a critical imagination. A red reading finds the political in the everyday, so that the daily practice of pulling cards becomes a documentation of working class lives, persisting to transcend exploitation, find belonging, and heal their soul. Red Tarot understands that the meaning within everyday social relations is to be inscribed, decoded, deployed, translated, and circulated. It enacts a rubedo, that is a flesh entry into a reality that we know radically, viscerally. As readings are a dialogic experience between querent and reader, text and audience, card and consciousness, they can be seen to enliven an oracular cultural mode of knowledge production that is wholly contextualized within the field of interaction, intuitive and emotionally sensitive. The alchemy of red reading looks upon the reality of the image as more than what is it, opening a door to an eros repressed, chemical reactions fixed on metal and paper that represent desires and lusts, longings and yearnings. Reading with the whole body, the socially matrixed body, the emotional body, and the soul is erotic reading.
Christopher, thank you for that beautiful reading. And as you are reading, one word pops out for me, which is the word dialogic. You talk about the text being a dialogue between the reader and the text speaker, the author. But I also think about just your role as a teacher and also your dialogism with your teachers. If we actually go even earlier in your book, your dedication is dedicated to all my teachers. So can you actually speak a little bit more about how your teacher identity speaks to the sport and also the teachers that you refer to in science?
Absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, I'm thinking of the planet Jupiter currently, which just made a conjunction with the sun in Taurus. The Taurus rising, so Jupiter is the planet of teachers, the planet of wisdom. And so I would like to say I'm blessed by Jupiter with this. And I have my background as an English teacher. I worked with middle school students, 7th and 8th graders in English. And very much the goal of the work was to make them critical readers, make them participants, make them not just passive recipients of theory, quote unquote, but use language to speak back, to speak for themselves, to generate language, to write the world, right? And I took a lot of time through my program at UC Santa Cruz, I love to be there in alignment with some of my favorite teachers, bell hooks, of course, Angela Davis, who also are tied to that institution, Gloria Alonso-Dua, tied to the space, but also the lineage intellectually there, in order to really articulate a teacher ethos that was committed to the students' bodies, the students' histories, the students' communities, respecting and enlivening their voice. And so that kind of ethos and transferred into my independent teaching now, and going just further with the texts of so many literary giants that we, I'm sure, all know and love, but really holding me when I felt alone, when I felt like they gave me voice and catharsis where no one else was witnessing me. There's a theory there, there's a biography, an essay that helped me think about my world in a new way. And so I wanted the work to weave together bell hooks, Gloria Alonso-Dua, and others to supplant tarot readings, but it also becomes a type of Trojan horse. In case you're into tarot, but have never read some critical texts or theorists, or if you're into critical theorists and artists, but you never read tarot, then you can read tarot, right? And doing so to just take tarot reading further.
Thank you for sharing that, Christopher. And I wanted to actually read a few lines, some inspirational lines that some of our participants today chose from the books from your teachers that you cite. One being, being king is a performance. Who shared that line with us today on the wall? Can you tell us where this is from?
It's from his book.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Sometimes we teach ourselves. Right? Here's another one. Imagination is the realm of soul, and the psyche's language is metaphorical. Who shared that line? Do you want to tell us what that's from? Do you know the author's name? Sometimes our teaching, we forget the name of the title, but the teaching remains with us.
It was Light in the Dark.
Oh, Gloria Alonso-Dua.
Yes.
Beautiful. This one's from Jose Marti. I want to have this world by the natural door. I want to. Is that correct? Am I saying that line correctly? Who chose this line?
No, you're not saying it correctly because it doesn't sound like me.
Oh,
But I wrote it. You want me to read it?
sure, of course. I would love that.
It says, I want to leave this world by the natural door. I want to leave this world by the natural door.
Thank you. Here's another one. Love is a combination of care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility, respect, and trust. and that is from Bell Hooks, All About Love. And I know who chose that one because I wrote it down.
I was like, I know that's about
And last but not least, art, reading, and writing are image-making practices that shape and transform what we are able to imagine and perceive. Who shared that one? Can you tell us where that's from?
This is from Light in the Dark.
Light in the Dark, also from Gloria Monzaldua. And thank you for sharing those works with us today, because it gives us a nice backgrounding on the teachers that also support you as well. I want to go on to my next question. So, what are some myths that people have about tarot? What are those myths, and what is it about those myths that you would like to dispel?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of myths around tarot or readings given its popular engagement in the imagination, popular imagination. Probably the first one, just entry, is that you have to be gifted a deck. You know, there's like that main myth, oh, I can't buy my own deck, or I can't get my own deck. Someone has to give it to me. It has to magically find its way into my hands. And that's not true. Okay, so we'll spell that myth. The fact that you're drawn to tarot, the fact that you're perusing the occult section, the fact that you are looking at it on your Instagram feed or whatnot, I think is more than enough reason and justification for you to pick up a deck yourself. And then that leads into you cultivating a deck collection, right? Like, how do you ever build like a deck that you would want if you're waiting for someone to gift it to you? It's not to say it's not magical or meaningful, someone does, but you should feel empowered definitely to start your own tarot journey.
And Christopher, I want to be completely transparent about my tarot journey as well, because I told Christopher the story before this book talk began, but I started 6 years ago, and I was taking a class called Honing Bodily Intuition, and my friend recommended me to take the class. And I remember, like, I didn't choose this, but it just kind of came upon me. But the tarot reading that occurred during that time was so impactful that I still remember it today. And I think it was a 6-year gap before I actually returned back to tarot. And I think it was actually reading the synopsis of your work that drew me back to it, because sometimes I would think of the tarot book and be like, this is not for me. But for some reason, this one was for me. Like, I was like, wow, Bell Hooks, wow, Gloria Monzaldua. So how is it that this critical literacy, this sort of post-colonial ways of thinking, how did you choose to integrate this into tarot, which usually is not, seen as an integration with these modes of knowledge?
Absolutely. 6 years long. Again, I'm honored that my book drew you kind of back to the tarot. Tarot is a text, right? Tarot is a text. You're reading the cards you read, the cards you're read by the cards. And in particular, Light in the Dark, Luz no Esporo by Gloria Monzaldua was very pivotal for me reading her theorizing. She's a feminist. She was, the ancestor teacher now. Who taught and worked at UC Santa Cruz and theorized about the body, theorized about divination, in doing so to repair ruptures in indigeneity and indigenous modes of consciousness and knowing and being. And so I feel like I stand very much upon the legs of her shoulders and like taking this text and like tying it to every single card and providing this reading. The parts of red read, applying the red light to the card. And it was an intuitive process. It was as well, but it was also a dedicated process. Letting a lot of the authors which I love and I'm thinking about naturally finding the reading, if you will, of the card that I would pull that day within the text that I was reading. I'm like, oh, that's the Ten of Swords, or the Tower, or what have you, right? And finding a greater expression, like a greater range that would allow for it than the standard white book that was one. And so there's a lot of introductory tarot texts, so I wanted this one to be not that.
And I want to go back to what you said about the red light, because there's one section of your introduction that really spoke to me. And usually when I think about text, I think about text almost as reflection, right? So when people usually are writing text, they're thinking about the past or the present, and they're doing, like the reflective thing, which is they take what they can perceive and try to make sense of that. if you talk about tarot, and this is the metaphor that I always go back to. And in case you want to read along, this is on page 2, the third line in the second paragraph, and I highlighted it here in the book. You see that red light makes each card a prism of poetic, political praxis. And I love the metaphor of a prism because a prism is not about reflection. A prism, when we think about reflection, the light hits off the water and it bounces off the water. But a prism, the light penetrates and it becomes a rainbow. It actually goes through. So what is it about tarot that forces us to kind of queer time, that forces the text to go beyond reflection in the past and the present?
I love that you use the word penetration. I'm a Scorpio, and so Scorpio is different than the Aries March when it is to penetrate, right? It is to get in. I have readings with clients at local markets in San Diego. Many don't know that they're going to get a reading that day. They don't. You book with me, but they come up and they're drawn, and we're getting into we have a limited amount of time, and we're maybe at a brewery or a crossroads section or some other space that's not wholly designated to read tarot. It's not the church, right? And when we get into the reading, there's a type of phenomenology. There's that we're looking and having the ability to perceive the past, the present, and the future at once, and in a way that disrupts our linearity, that disrupts the straight time that we are cast into, right? In order to reweave our own narratives, to rescript our identities, to imagine alternative possible outcomes, and in a way that is visceral for that client who is asking, I don't want to say necessarily life or death questions, but with great import and great consequence. It's not just merely a reflective self-portrait for fun, right? It's they're coming with a need for an answer via an alternative means.
I love that. And what you are talking about, with most texts, I think of people creating that linearity as almost a timeline, right? And so you have this year, followed by this year, followed by this year. But then you talk about our deep interconnection to nature. And I almost get the sense that making sense of time we're almost like a tree or other, right? And we have tree rings. And the past is not here, it's not distant there, but rather it's at the core. But then we are ever so expanding out towards our growth, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I pulled the world card today. So if y'all know the world card, it's a great card to pull, right? And I talk about the world in the book actually as a card that if we perceive our own tree ring, it would be by looking at the world. And so the fact that you just kind of drew that in, I think, is in itself a representation of the divinatory field that constellates when you read tarot. You're making meaningful connections between an interpersonal experience, my own process of growth. This is my first book, my first book over. And then with you and with your perception, and there is, again, the dialogic mode of we're connecting and we're having this conversation about all of us here. So there's a beautiful witnessing that is poetic, but that I also argue, needs to be politicized. We need to save our trees, right? We need to save our environment. We need to think about the spaces which are viable for life.
And I think one of your teachers, Paulo Freire, he talks about apoliticality, and actually that in itself is a political stance, right? There's no apoliticality that's actually possible. I want to move on to the idea that Red Tarot pushes against traditional tarot. So how does Red Tarot push against traditional tarot as a divinatory text?
Well, as you say, there's no overt it's apolitical typically tarot texts. They're typically about they're encapsulated within your own psyche. The readings, they may, of course, deal with who you're interacting with, people in your life, your career, etc. You have readings for that, but there's a limitation in terms of the social critique or application or consideration. There's not it's free floating, rather than grounded in history and in time and in place. And so, as well, I would say there's a new cohort of tarot texts coming out, which I'm happy to see that are politicized, that are critical. But mine is red, and in particularly naming and centering a focus of indigeneity. Right? That red, not some, I was like, it didn't even occur to me the other political red. Like red is the natives, you know. Okay. Just clarify.
And one thing that I like just was so drawn to is I feel like we do have very similar backgrounds actually. We're both ESL teachers, we both work in language education. And something that I learned pretty recently about the indigenous conception of language is the idea of animacy. And before reading your book, I approached it from the works of Robin Wall Kimmerer, who talks about how language in English is so static, right? It's trying to compartmentalize everything. So she talks about the word bay, you kind of like try to like compartmentalize the bay as itself. But she says in indigenous languages, there's something about animacy, about how these words become verbs, right? So what does it mean to be a bay when you render it into indigenous language? And so like when you think about to be a bay, you also think about the way that a river flows into the bay and how the bay empties out into the ocean, right? And so like how do these words and how does the use of language actually transform the way that we think? And so you use these words a lot like epistemology, ontology. Can you kind of dissect what those words might mean in an everyday way and how that is at the very deep philosophy of red tarot?
Absolutely. That shift where we are conditioned, we are oriented towards a certain way of being, a way of knowing ourselves, right? These theories of knowledge and how we know things, epistemology, ontology, how we know who we are existentially, what it means to be generally a person or a woman or a man or an American or whatever else, right? Of your age or your family, what does your name mean? And without a level of self-reflexivity, you will just be going to the conditioned Western mode of self-conception, which is a dominator imperial mode of consciousness. Being colonized, but internalizing a little colonized, right? As oppressing you, silencing you, having you conform, having you adhere to strict regimen of what is right and wrong and acceptable. And instead, the work and in the reading, with yourself, with the reading of the work, but also in having readings with your friends, with your family, with clients, having like a critical intervention, right, to peel back that layer, to pierce the veil, to pivot and destabilize it a bit. Tarot is a game of chance, if you will, and so we're already subverting our logical, rational mind, which is what the Western mode prioritizes. We're delving into chaos, and we're making meaning out of chaos, and then we're creating relationships among them. And so that chaotic relationality is a type of initiation that I think is essential to re-cohering an indigenous mode of knowledge and way of knowing.
I love that because you mentioned a few things that speak to me, which is, we have these conceptions of male, female, right, wrong, but then red tarot is that diffractiveness to understand that when we diffract, we also see that everything's kind of a spectrum, that there's multiple possibilities, and to resist against that historical binarism and separation, but understanding that everything is kind of constituted.
That gets to another myth that I would say about tarot. I love it. Is that there's no one definitive interpretation of a card. There's no authority on the card, and that there are no bad cards because of what you're saying. The spectrum of application and that the reading is situated within a time and a place for a person, right? The Ten of Swords can be very hard cards. There may be bitter cards. But I always call the Ten of Swords card like how to kill a king. Like, sometimes it's a coup. Sometimes it's an off with a patriarch's head. It's King Henry being, beheaded. It's like there's a lot of interpretation and application that is wholly contextualized again within the field of the reading. But there is still a thread. It also doesn't mean anything you want it to mean just because just like there's that capacity that they're talking about, that refractive capacity. I probably wrote that.
I want to shift into, I know that a lot of our members who are writers is interested in knowing how might tarot sort of be a tool towards being able to write better. So like being able to use tarot as a tool for writing.
Absolutely, it's part of the literacy, right? I mean, a part of reading tarot, it's already giving you half of the work in terms of, the other half is like the writing, right? It's the interpretation, the hermeneutic act of interpretation, which draws upon your ability to write, to storytell. It's a divinatory poetics, as my friend and great colleague Selah Sederstrom writes about. And using the card either as a way to like create a narrative from the cards that you're drawing as inspiration for your own story. If you're having a writer's block, essentially drawing a card as maybe like a good daimon, a good spirit, an aide who has a message or has a higher advantage that can help you over that dead end of the maze that you're trying to get to the center, right? And I think it attunes, again, the visual, descriptive abilities, the storytelling abilities, where you can just use it as a mode of inspiration in and of itself, and then also as like a spirit as well to guide you into your own aim, but it's not directly about tarot, right?
And can I borrow your tarot deck to do a little
Yes,
demonstration?
absolutely.
So let's just say, and I should probably speaking to this microphone. Let's just say that I am in the midst of a story and I am getting to the middle part and I have no idea how to get to the climax, I would say. So I kind of have two characters and they are evolving in a way where they get into a conflict and I have no idea how this conflict is going to resolve itself. How am I use this as a tool to like figure out my next step of writing?
I love that. I would draw a card for each of the characters.
So should I shuffle first?
I shuffle, you can shuffle along.
Okay, what's your shuffle? Okay, I'll do cards. Okay, so this card will be for one character. And if you want to, can I put the pass it around? This will be for one character. And this will be for the other character. This will be for the other character. So how might I use these poles as a way to learn?
What was the first one? I think it was the first one. Three of Cups?
And what's that one again?
That one's the Queen of Cups.
Queen of Cups, okay.
Nice. Two Cancer card. There's astrology behind it as well, which I'll let them know. And then, okay, I would add, so cards for each character, understanding their dynamic, considering the way that they're operating, the way that they're communicating. And then draw a card for their conflict. Yeah.
I feel like there are copies at the bottom of the pile, so I'll pull this one.
Ooh.
And for this the next card.
That's so real. Like, that's so real. It's a man at the root of our problem here. The conflict is the father, the conflict is the patriarch, the conflict is the king, the husband, right? We're getting these maybe mother and daughters or sisters, right? This woman with her court, right? With her sister friends. This beautiful protected garden, high femme space by the water, and it's peaceful. And you have this man who's just like, this is my seat, and this is what we're gonna do, and like just not wanting to give up power, right? The grasping of power, and right versus I always call the Three of Cups like my Destiny's Child part. And the harmony, they know how to harmonize. There's not a hogging of the stage. Does that answer your question?
That's beautifully done, thank you, Christopher. That actually helped me lift my writer's block. It actually just channels me into new directions. And it really allows me to understand that, like, these kind of help me open up possibilities when the body is tense and, like, doesn't quite know where to go. I do want to open this up to the Q&A. And so Andy will be passing out cards to you. And let's just take like a quick 2-minute break and have you think about the questions that you want to ask Christopher. And on your card, if you want to join Christopher's Substack, If you want to also join Christopher's Substack, make sure to add your email onto the card, and you can be entered into a raffle for a free copy of Red Tarot. And me and Christopher are just going to take a walking break and this is sitting. I figured we all stay up right
Meant to be a tarot reader. Oh, yeah.
You know, I feel a connection to the art. I just have to do more practice, I should say. Like, you kind of have to cut it down. Or cut it 5 times. I have another idea.
Yeah. Sorry. I was like, even the queen and the king. The whole power narrative versus like them versus. One partner is another partner, and then like their dynamics, not necessarily their conflict, but.
So it's not just writing, but it's also just reading the situation that is Take about a minute more to get your questions down on the card, and me and Christopher will spread out those cards and choose the questions that speaks to us.
See, that's interesting.
All right, I made sure this mic is on. Also, as y'all are writing, for those of you who brought a deck today, and even if you didn't, maybe think of a card that comes to mind, to consider what does it mean to transgress? What does it mean to transgress? You can pull a card for this, and then we'd love to hear your feedback afterwards based on the card that you're pulling, or also just what comes up afterwards for you, right? And trying to make it relate to the tarot.
And I would say you can also share your interpretation with a partner. And so if you are having a hard time making sense of that card that you're pulling from the one that you're envisioning in your mind, you can also move to a neighbor and be like, what is this? Sometimes it's easier in dialogue than asking absolutely. And we'll recongregate in 3 minutes after you ponder this question based on how it works. In about 2 minutes, I'm going to be asking 3 people to share what they think about this question. What does it mean to transgress? So in about 2 minutes.
You know what I mean?
All right, I think it is now our time to come back together. And as I said before, I would like for 3 people to share their interpretation of this question. What does it mean to transgress based on the card that they pulled? Do we have any volunteers in the room? We can hand the mic over to you.
You should show us your cards.
Okay. So I pulled the ten of Pentacles, and I see this as transgressing against the norm that says what success is or what you should do in terms of accumulating material, comforts or wealth or whatever. Someone who's not done that, whether consciously or unconsciously.
Can I ask about, we're gonna pull some further. Alright, what visual elements of the card perhaps are striking to you in considering that consideration of success? And what do they offer?
Well, I just see, for the visual on this card, a family, a traditional family, and that's what one strives for. I mean, I'm talking about the image that is coming to me in the card. And so somebody who does not align with that may not feel that this is the vision of success for them.
Absolutely. I think, as a certain age, you know, the grandparents are always like, when are you gonna have kids, all right, when is the partner coming or whatnot? Okay, well, any other cousin who's gone down that line, like, I have a different motive of success, right? Amazing, thank you.
Would you mind sharing your name with us?
Erica.
Erica, thank you. And Erica would like to pass the mic. Who would like to be next? Sharing their part.
Well, I think transgress often means, when you transgress, it's like you are crossing people. And often, when you transgress, I tend to interpret it as going against the consensus, going against the person who transgresses is someone who often is someone who makes moral or ethical or rational decisions, not by looking around to see what everybody else is saying or what everybody else is thinking. A person who transgresses will speak up and say what they think, even if it makes their friends angry, even if it gets them in trouble. And the card that occurs to me is the Seven of Wands. Because typically in the Rider-Waite deck, it's depicted as a man who's fighting off, or someone who's fighting off a host of other people. He's backed into a corner, but he's still fighting. And that is that you, if you say something, if you point out something, or you say something that is not, the crowd around you doesn't like to hear it, sometimes you have to still say it. You can't just, go along and pretend to agree with everybody. That's just my interpretation.
Fantastic. As you, I would love to maybe read a little excerpt from the Seven of Wands, because I do think of that card very much. I mean, of course, the whole book has this mode of transgression to it. I think you express that beautifully, but in particular, the Seven of Wands. And I do open each section of the book, each essay, if you will, with epigraph, a quotation from a teacher. And so these are not my words. But I will read. Seven of Wands. What is my life if I am not visible? Contrary to what homosexual rhetoric suggests, my queerness and my radical femininity are not just retractable features of a grander being who can comfortably exist in a cis-heteronormative society. These are not secrets that only expose themselves in who I choose to love in the privacy of my own space. No. My feminine queerness is in all of my identity. It lives in every part of my body and will manifest through my gestures, my behavior, my walk, my thoughts, the way I dress, and all the things that make me visible as I truly am. These are not tricks. Even my chandelier earrings do not serve a decorative purpose. They make me me. So if I ever had to suspend my visibility, I would be socially dead. But though I am alive, I am still unsafe. An attack is penciled into the fate of every day as long as I have the audacity to exist. Attacks range from a disapproving glance from a stranger, refusal of entry from a taxi driver on the way to work, to a whole street screaming and shouting in your direction, as they did to Glow and me last Saturday on Eloff Street. These attacks, physical or otherwise, are all violent and they are all equally traumatic, and above all, they compromise the quality of one's overall life. Therefore, it is not enough for hateful, transphobic comments to be replaced by passive compliments upon entering safer spaces when you still have to walk out and exist in an unsafe world. And so reading that, and that is an excerpt from an author in Black Futures, that card is about when you are already transgressive in your inherent being, when it's not only a choice, but it's inscribed upon your body anytime you enter a space because of the normative world. And so what is it to fortify your fire and just keep burning brighter, right? And like push back even further and take that as fuel. So that was sparked from I thought that was a beautiful card that came to you for transgression, so thank you. And your name?
I'm Pam.
And Pam, would you like to pass the mic to one final person who would like to share with us what transgression means to them?
King of Swords, and it's from another piece of art deck. And this particular image shows many women, it's like people who are exiting something, sort of a Greek sort of edifice, and they're dropping their swords and falling into the ocean. And it looks like kind of their own volition. And so to me, like Christopher was just talking about the Ten of Swords and talking about some sort of transgressive ways of looking at the Ten of Swords, but I guess to looking at this image, I see this like defeat as more like a chosen, like giving it or letting go. Maybe like because defeat is near anyways, but the choice to simply let go, I think is extremely transgressive now because we're so constricted into identities and responsibilities and time bound in so many ways that looking at this picture of all of these people just sort of like leaning into, falling into the water feels pretty transgressive and really beautiful and liberating.
Thank you. Please share your name with us, darling.
Lisa.
Hi, Lisa. Beautiful. Like, I love the notion of, refusing to give in to someone's desire to, like the Ten of Swords, and I talk about the Ten of Swords in the book about this being like this coup against you, being gossiped about, being slandered, being brought down to your knees, being humbled, right? And typically by some, patriarchal bullshit, right? And that image of female presenting bodies, of femme bodies, diving into the ocean, feels like a refusal to submit to that as well. And so it's like, okay, you can be at the end of the cliff, but we're not going to give you the satisfaction of like defeating us. We're going to dive into the fucking ocean. We're going home. We're going to become mermaids, And that does feel certainly transgressive.
Thank you very much for sharing with us your interpretation. We're going to move on to the Q&A section. And Christopher pulled 3 beautiful questions. Christopher, do you know which one do you want to start off with?
Yes, I'll start with giving the question on introduction. And so this person writes or asks, can you talk with beautiful Henry? Can you talk about your first introduction to working with tarot and what my first step was? And
who asked that question? What's your name?
Stephanie.
Stephanie, thank you. And so I want to dispel the myth because I was gifted a first deck and a first reading. It happened, I would say, I was drawn to my first deck like very young, and through fear, another myth of the tarot that it invites evil spirits, and especially culturally for Catholics, as I was raised Catholic, put that away, so it's like, okay. But I was gifted a first reading at a very pivotal, uncertain, chaotic time in my life. I was backpacking, doing a work exchange in Hawaii, and the reading was a gift. Like, it wasn't something I sought out, solicited. It was very much like a ritual of generosity. It was a familiarity. It was inviting in, and that reading has stood with me. And I wasn't like, I'm going to get into tarot now. It was like for guidance about that crossroads in my life. And then I had friends give me decks. So my first official deck was a Santa Muerte tarot, which is not right away like coded necessarily. There's some a little bit, but it's like wholly its own thing. And that kind of helped me as well start learning from my own experience of pulling the cards rather than strictly from the book. I think that part came in. But yeah, so thank you for that.
Okay,
Yes, absolutely. This person does not. Thank you. We'll have you name yourself.
The question is, can you say more about the connection between astrology and tarot? And whose question is that? Can you state your name?
Emily?
Emily, thank you for the question.
Sure.
So, of course, I personally do love the Rider-Waite Coleman Smith deck, and they were part of the Hermetic order of the Golden Dawn, right? Some combination of those words. And did the work of syncretizing the tarot, the major arcana to both the planets and the zodiac. So the major arcana, the fifth suit of a deck that makes it a tarot deck. Again, deals with these larger planetary energies. And then the minor arcana is split into the decans. And so the decans are 10 degrees of the zodiac, splitting things like Virgo 1, Virgo 2, and Virgo 3, that also have planetary rulers. So you'll have like the sun card is ruled by the sun, the planet sun. The high priestess is the moon. But then you'll get the Three of Cups, and that's Mercury and Cancer. Right? And so these become more information to draw upon. They become part of the history of the Decanic images that is tied to astrology, which is like our most ancient timekeeping calendar. And when you integrate and learn both, you make for dynamic and rich readings. Using the tarot as also visual calendar for the astrology.
And this question is, in your tarot practice, or perhaps in your writing process too, do you ever find yourself slipping back into binary, colonized, or sort of strict ways of thinking? How do you figure, not quite sure what this word, fight against that, if so? And also they said, I love your substack. Thank you. And whose question is that?
That was me, I'm May.
I'm May, thank you for that question.
Thank you. That's a great question. I think that it's a process of, yes, needing to push back against these forces, like imperialism, coloniality, territorially acquisitive perpetuity. Like if they don't stop, right? Like they're always trying to reach and colonize and like co-opt and appropriate and like eradicate. So it requires a daily vigilance, which doing daily tarot reading for me is a way of maintaining epistemic flexibility, of keeping myself like open into the chaos of it all, and making meaning. And at the same time, having an awareness, especially for my writing, for my Substack, having the cards, especially the Rider-Waite and others, be representative of this colonial imagination that I can like pinpoint and hold out and externalize and then critique and write from. So it actually adds clarity rather than imagining that has no basis within us. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great answer.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And we are now going to kind of move into the signing portion of today. So Christopher has wonderful books for sale in the back over there, and they are here to perhaps answer the questions that are remain unanswered for now, but you can pose your question with him in the later part of this day. But Christopher, do you have any last words that you want to leave for the entire group?
Oh my gosh, just thank you all so much for being here. I will choose from someone who left their email on those cards for a book to get today as well. So if you did not stick around, I'll choose and maybe announce that also in a moment. But just thank you all so much. Thank you for being here, for participating, for sharing your time and your space. It's been an honor.
So let's give a warm. There's also amazing camaraderie left in here, so please connect and share your thoughts with each other, and maybe share your favorite ones to work out well.